What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. And there is breaking news about 90 minutes ago that we start our show with, and that is that Emmanuel Forbes is going to be out for some undetermined amount of time with wrist surgery / thumb surgery. He's got a torn ulnar collateral ligament. Yes, that is the one that if you're a baseball pitcher requires you to get Tommy John surgery. This sounds like it's more on the thumb side of his UCL, not the elbow side of his UCL. It's a big ligament that runs up your arm on the ulnar, which is the bone. And yeah, you didn't think you were going to get an anatomy lesson, did you, Anthony? You didn't know that I knew all that about the UCL, huh?
I did not know all of that, but now I do.
You got your ulnar, and it runs up there, and that's why you got the ligament that runs up, and you got the thumb and the elbow, and there's a bone that connects the two. Yeah, it's your ulnar bone.
That hurts.
Yeah, so he's got a torn UCL according to Ian Rappaport, and now been confirmed by all the usual local suspects, and that sucks for him. It sucks a whole lot for him. And I think there's like kind of three main points here. There's what does this mean for Emmanuel? What does this mean for the team in the short term? And what does this mean for the team in the long term? And the first two are similar. It's bad, and really the third one is the long one. The third one is the same. The long term, it's bad. I know that might sound crazy because Emmanuel Forbes didn't play that well last week, and I didn't think he played with the kind of intensity and all that kind of stuff that they expect, but maybe he had a torn ligament in his thumb, and that could have affected his ability to perform because performing while in pain is a skill that some people perform better than others, and I also wouldn't want to have to make tackles if I had a torn ligament in my thumb. So there's that. I think on the very short term, like obviously this is bad for Emmanuel. This is a guy that wants to be able to go out and prove himself, prove that he's a better player. But then again, it might be a good thing for Emmanuel. It might get him off the field, let him reset, let him watch how they continue to coach and teach, and maybe he can learn some things from the sideline. Ultimately, he's going to have to go out and play to keep his spot on the team in the long term. And I'm not talking just about the rest of the season, but starting spot, but then a roster spot ultimately going into next year. He's going to go out and have to play and play well. And if this is a chance for him to reset, after a tough outing on Sunday in the opener, then, it sucks because, his wrist probably really hurts, and being in physical pain is not fun. It sucks because he, if Noah Igbenogany or someone else goes out and plays really well, are they going to want to put him back in? You never want to lose your spot to injury because there's always a risk that you don't get put back in. But I think a lot of people are going to look at this for the team and say, like, this is bad for the team. And I would tell you that based off training camp, that is not the case. Now, there's definitely a chance they play better. I would say almost certainly they're going to play better than they did on Sunday because they can't play much worse defensively than they did on Sunday. That is something that they just will not allow. This staff has real focuses on what they want to correct for this week, things they want to get right. Joe Witt talked about today. He's like, we got to fix our leverages, we got to fix our discipline, we got to fix our communication, and they have ways to go about doing that are going to produce better results. They're also not facing a team that has the potency and firepower that and cohesion and all those things that New York or that Tampa had. And by the way, New York also has Daniel Jones, who is not currently remotely near Baker Mayfield's neighborhood. So for the team, they have to now play someone that got beaten out by Emmanuel Forbes in training camp. And I think that's important to say because most of what all of you out there have seen is the Emmanuel Forbes that we saw on Sunday, which looked very similar to the Emmanuel Forbes that we saw last year. But I was there for enough of training camp to see Emmanuel Forbes, the good version, the guy who's breaking on balls, getting his hands in there, making plays, locking guys down. Did he get beat by Terry McLaurin deep quite a few times? Yeah. Was there inconsistency? Yeah. But was he consistently better than Michael Davis? Yes. Was he consistently better than Noah Igbenogany? Yes. Was he consistently, frankly, better than Benjamin St. Juste? I don't know about consistently, but the last couple weeks of camp, probably he was probably better than BSJ, and deserved to be the number one corner on the depth chart and the number one guy on the roster. So I think that we have to be realistic about the fact that we're talking about a guy that at his best is the best that they've got. And now you for sure are having BSJ kind of be your number one guy, and we've seen what's happened the last bunch of years when that's the case. Or you're hoping that Michael Davis all of a sudden is something that he wasn't all camp and didn't show real consistently last year. Like he had a couple good years with the Chargers, but there's a reason they were ready to let him go. Or Noah Igbenogany, who's been a more of a journeyman type guy, but has some potential and that he plays at a level that he frankly never has before. And I think in some ways it's kind of like when fans always root for the backup quarterback, right? The backup quarterback's the favorite guy on the roster until the second that he's got to play. Then you realize why he was the backup. And what I think would be a silly reaction to the Emmanuel Forbes injury is one, any form of joy for someone getting hurt. That is inhumane, and that is not going to be tolerated on this here radio show. But on a much more less human level, on a pure football level, I think it'd be silly to think that they have something better. Now, I also think that what we saw last week was not the best version of Emmanuel Forbes, and that week 2 Emmanuel Forbes healthy would have been better than week 1 Emmanuel Forbes, healthy. So he's going to grow, he's going to get better, and again, that doesn't mean that someone can't come in and play better than Forbes did. It's just we won't know what Forbes would have been had he not gotten hurt, had he been able to stay out there, and had he continued to hopefully show the kind of growth that he showed in training camp when he eventually did turn the corner and did play the way that they want and get the results that they were looking for. So short term, and for Emmanuel Forbes, I feel really bad for him because I hate dudes getting hurt. It's an unfortunate reality of not just football but pro sports that this happens, of athletics. I mean, shoot, I twisted my ankle running today. And fine, it was a minor deal, but like it happens. You exist in the world. You can get hurt, and the higher athletic output you need, certainly NFL football. This is the kind of stuff that happens. Collisions at high speed. I don't know how he did it. Whatever it was, he's got a torn UCL. He needs thumb/wrist surgery. He also is going to probably be on the wrong end of better results, in that whoever is out there this weekend is probably going to play better than he did last weekend. That does not mean that he ultimately is a worse player than whoever that is. I'm guessing it's going to be Igbenogany, but that's also NFL football. This is not saying everyone should cry for Emmanuel Forbes. Like, this is the unfortunate reality of how this league works, is that if, because you're no longer facing Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, you go out there and Noah Igbenogany is able to play really well against Wan'Dale Robinson and a rookie Malik Neighbors in his second game, well, everyone's going to be like, how you said that there are worse players out there. It's like, yeah, Forbes could have probably done the same thing, but he's not going to get that opportunity. And maybe he comes back in week 3 and has to deal with Jamar Chase, and that's going to suck. Or maybe it's not till week 4 and there's good receivers, basically throughout their entire schedule. So at the end of the day, Forbes will get another shot. And I hope that by then he has got it figured out up top in a way that he is not just like in a good headspace, but that he is in a place where the communication and responsibilities are clear. He can go out and play fast and play physical. He can get his hands on some footballs and show the ability that he showed in college to be the SEC's all-time leader in pick sixes, if not the NCAA, I believe's all-time leader in pick sixes. But for now, it is yet another shot to this cornerback room that feels kind of thin to start with, where there was a lot of experimentation of, can this guy that hasn't played as well as we have wanted so far, whether that's Forbes, whether that's St. Juice, on down the list, can those guys turn it around? And they're going to have to turn it around this weekend without 13 out there. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And when we get back, we'll take your calls, the reaction to the news, 301-230-0980. Emmanuel Forbes out. We're not quite sure for how long yet. Obviously, if any news comes through, we will pass it along. But Emmanuel Forbes out, needs wrist surgery. What you make of it? 301-230-0980. We take your calls next on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980, where, Anthony, we actually have very smart people listening. And I was corrected on the ligament. You have two UCLs? Anthony literally looked at his wrist.
Oh, yeah. Left and right, right?
No, well, in that case, you have four. Because there is one ulna, the bone, but apparently there's a UCL in your thumb / your wrist and another one in your elbow.
And the one Forbes hurt is the one in the thumb wrist.
Yeah. So all the things they said about Tommy John surgery and whatever, I mean, that's correct about if you tear the one in your elbow, but maybe this could become the Emmanuel Forbes surgery, the one on the wrist. Probably not. There's probably already a name for it. But yeah. So thanks to let me give credit where credit is due here. Back to the Dr. Brian Press doctor of physical therapy. He's like, sorry to correct, but the UCL does not run from your elbow to your wrist. You have two separate UCLs, one at your elbow, another at your wrist. And I was like, you want to know what? I have enough humility to admit when I was wrong.
I love to see it, man. Love to see it. And also, we're being educated.
We're being educated. Now we're educating others. You have 2/4 UCLs in your body. 301-230-0980. This is where the educational portion of the program ends and the calling begins. 301-230-0980. It's the Team 980 listener line. What is your reaction to the Emmanuel Forbes news? Let's go to Kenny in Largo. Kenny, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, what's going on, fellas? How you doing?
Doing well, Kenny. What you
That's
got?
good. So I hope I hope you understand my thought on this one, okay? So my thought on this one is, well, my first question is, why was he at corner to begin with? Meaning, was he there because they wanted to see what they had in him, or was he there because they had no one better? If he was out there because we had no one better, then I'm worried, because that means whoever comes up after him is going to be in trouble. But if he was out there because they wanted to see what we had, maybe the person that comes in after him, whoever that may be, could be better, and we could have a better defense, or at least a better corner on that side. So that's my thought process on Emmanuel Forbes. What y'all think?
Yeah, Kenny, I think it's a good question, and I think the answer is kind of both. I've talked about this quite a bit throughout the offseason, but their roster needed so much work that there was only so much that they could do at one time. And trying to get top flight players is just, it's hard, right? Most of them come through the draft. There's only so many top draft picks that you have. Obviously, their first round pick they needed to use on a quarterback. They went in other positions early. Although, I mean, Mike Sanders still is a second rounder. So like it's not like that they didn't address that position. They just went inside at nickel instead of outside at outside corner. And I think that they made some calculated risks. They were like, for some of these guys, for a guy like Forbes who was drafted last year, and Peter certainly had thoughts on him, right? He would have scouted him last year when he was in San Francisco, and maybe he wouldn't have taken him when Ron did, and certainly not over a guy like Christian Gonzalez, I don't think, based off of how Peter's, like the things that Peter seems to value versus the things the previous administration did. You have to take some risks there, and you have to say, like, well, we have these players under contract. We don't really have a great way to get other ones. Let's see if we can coach them up and get better out. And so, I again, like, this is why I'm kind of, for the clarity of the argument here, I'm glad they traded Jahan Dotson, right? They took their last two first-round picks, and they gave them opportunities as starters, as top guys, and ultimately, by the end of camp, Forbes had earned his starting job. If Noah Igbenogany had been better in training camp, they wouldn't have started Emmanuel Forbes just because he's a first-round pick. They would have started one of the guys who beat him out. Or Jahan Dotson did not beat out guys like De'Ami Brown or Luke McCaffrey or whoever, and they didn't like the way he was coming to work every day. So they were like, you want to know what? If you don't want to be here, like, we can send you somewhere else. Forbes fought to be here. He played well enough to earn his spot, and then he had a bad game. And guys have bad games, and I very much would expect that they're better this weekend without him, because I think they would have been better with him. And that's the hard part of the evaluation piece of this is, okay, you can't play the, we're not in a global simulator here. You can't play the New York game once with Forbes and once without him. You just have to do your best guess on what would have happened with him, or with him, since they're going to play without him. And so I hope that, like, in a way answers your question, in that there's a very good chance that there's someone who could prove it this weekend that they're better for right now. Certainly that they played better than he did last week, but also he did earn that spot coming out of camp. And that's because it's really hard to acquire really good players all in one offseason, and they chose to take risks in certain places versus others. And corner was a place with the talent that they had in Forbes, the talent that they had in St. Juice. They were willing to coach it up, take that risk, and they're going to live with the results. And if the results are bad, they'll address it next offseason.
Sounds good.
All right, Kenny, appreciate the call. 301-230-0980 is the Team 980 listener line. Your thoughts or questions on the Emmanuel Forbes injury? Let's go to Gary in Upper Marlboro. Gary, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I think my take on this is it depends on how long he's out. Okay, if he's out, 8 to 10 weeks with this, I think it's a real blow to the franchise because you wanted to see. I think this was going to get a sample size of him as to whether or not he was the future at the cornerback position. And I think you alluded to this that hey, if he's not the guy, then maybe we need to address this in the draft next year. And if it's an 8 to 10 week injury or something that takes him out the full year, they won't be able to make that evaluation, and they may be forced to make a move when maybe they don't need to make a move if he was on the field and he proved he could be the number one guy. If it's a 4 to 6 week injury and he still has 10 games to play, I think that's enough of a sample size for them to make that determination. But it's hard for a young player to lose time. I think, like you said, he played in training camp well. He earned the starting position, and you just hope mentally it doesn't take him somewhere that he doesn't need to go. But I agree with you. I think they're going to play better next week, whether he was in there or not. But I just hope the young man keeps his head up and, does his rehab and comes back stronger than ever. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks, Gary. Thanks for the call. I think Gary's point, though, unlocks the next path or the next pathway of discussion here for Emmanuel Forbes, which is how he handles this rehab is now his test. They are watching how you do everything, and especially for a guy that's had some questions at times about his work ethic and about how he comes to work, his willingness to be disciplined, and that's on the field, right? We talked about it earlier in the week. Dan Quinn talking about how when he went to BSJ after he gave up the first touchdown to Evans, he's like, "Hey man, what happened?" Benjamin was like, I was there. I turned the wrong way. I know what I got to do." And Dan's like, "Great, let's fix it." Like, that doesn't mean that Benjamin can just say all the time, "Hey man, I know what to do." It's like eventually you got to do it. But in week one, playing some new techniques, playing in a new scheme, playing against Mike Evans, okay, fine. Hey, you know immediately what you got to do. You got to have the recognition next time to do it. And then he was like, when you go to a guy and he says, I don't know what I was supposed to do, that's a lot harder to work with, and that's not going to fly in the long term if a guy just constantly doesn't know what to do. And if you read between the lines, like, he was talking about Emmanuel Forbes. And so I think that now with that, with this different test, right? A different test to show the discipline, the professionalism, how you attack a rehab, how you focus or not in meetings, assuming that he's still going to be a part of them. Because sometimes when you're rehabbing an injury, you wind up doing some of the physical work in the meetings. Like, you don't need to be in a game plan meeting for a game you're not playing. But they also, if I'm DQ and I'm Joe Witt and I'm Adam Peters coming down from on high being like, "Hey, guys, we need to figure out and make sure he's in these meetings because I want to know how he conducts himself in the meetings." Like, do you stay locked in? Are you there to help your teammates? Are you contributing, doing whatever you can? Or are you just moping or doing the bare minimum? Are you in the building to do your rehab and immediately going home, not hanging out with your teammates, not being a part of the team, not being a part of the culture that they want to set here? And so this does become an enormous test for Emmanuel Forbes. And I'm not saying it's a bigger test than it would be on the field. That would be incredible, or than if he was on the field. That would be incredibly hyperbolic. But for a lot of the stuff on a baseline level, before you even hit the field, a lot of the stuff that they've got questions, and thus we've got questions about Emmanuel Forbes on, he can prove a lot in this period. And so this is a huge, typically it's 6 to 8 weeks is the number I've seen floated around in a couple of different places for recovery from this. So assuming he gets the surgery quickly, we're talking 6 to 8 weeks. He'll be back, let's see, it's early November to late November, depending on what the timeline is for him. So this is an enormously important stretch for Emmanuel Forbes' professional career. Not to mention, like, how you attack rehab determines how successful the rehab is. So if he doesn't do the work that he needs to do, like, his thumb and wrist are not going to be right, which is kind of important for someone who wants to catch footballs for a living. So there's that element as well. But I just think how he comes to work every day with a good attitude, with a professional approach, with an idea of, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make this team better, even though I can't be on the field right now. If he does that stuff, his leash gets a lot longer without him even having to play. Eventually, he's going to have to do it on the field, but his leash can get longer, or it could get shorter based off how he attacks this rehab and the workman's, yeoman's approach that Dan Quinn expects and Adam Peters expect of players in their organization as they try to build this thing from the ground up. 301-230-0980 is the phone number, 301-230-0980. More of your calls on the breaking news that Emmanuel Forbes is going to be out for a little bit with wrist surgery next on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up later in the show, Britney Sykes from the Washington Mystics, who absolutely dismantled the Chicago Sky last night to now get into playoff position or closer to playoff position. They're just one game back of Chicago for the 8th seed in the WNBA playoffs. Slim has been leading the charge since the Olympic break. She's playing great ball. Absolutely wrecked Chicago last night. We'll talk to Britney Sykes, the engine that makes the Washington Mystics go, coming up at 6:30 tonight. Our pick 6 at 6. Dan Pizzuta at 5 o'clock from the 33rd team, who's going to be with us on Thursdays this year. He was awesome in his debut with us last week, so excited to have DP back on the show. But now we're taking your calls on the breaking news that Emmanuel Forbes is out for a hot second here, probably 6 to 8 weeks with a torn UCL in his wrist that requires surgery, first reported by Ian Rappaport. Let's go to Mark in Largo to keep the calls rolling. Mark, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, what's up, Craig? How you doing, my buddy?
I'm good, Mark. How are you?
My guy, how you doing? Look, I know a lot of people want to rain on Emmanuel Forbes, and I get it. I do. I understand that. But no offense. I think we gotta give this kid as many chances as we possibly can. I think we pulled the plug on Jahan Dotson too early. And the saddest thing about Jahan Dotson, he had a great first year, and the second year wasn't that bad. And I thought we ran him out. I mean, look, I get it, but we got to give these first rounders, even if they're not ours, a chance. We got to, because if they go to another team and they get it, everybody's gonna be sitting over here saying, "Well, Dag, what did we do wrong?" You know, I know that hasn't happened, but I just think that we got to give this kid a chance. I know everybody can't stand him, and he's a lot of things, and he does need to grow up. But you got to remember, these are still kids too. They're still young men, and a lot of them don't know how to handle themselves well. Now, a lot of people, I mean, it's a lot of things you could say to that. That's enough. That's a different story for a different day. But I will say we have to give this kid a chance. We just can't just keep giving up on first rounders that quickly. That's why I was so upset about Adam Peters, because I felt like giving up on Jahan Dotson that quickly was totally unacceptable. Chase Young, I understood. I totally understood why they did what they did last year. But Jahan Dotson, after 3 years, really after 2 years, into a division rival, I just had a problem with that. But Craig, you do a great show. I'm going to make comments about your situation with you and Logan later, probably sometime next week. I like you. You're in a good mood, and I want to keep you in a good mood.
What situation with me and Logan?
No, not the situation, your show with Logan next week. I'll do that next week, this show, because you're in a good mood, and I like you, Craig. I truly like you.
No, you can't do that. No, that's not how this works. What do you have to say about Take Command?
Oh, my God, Craig. Oh, my God.
I'll come back to the fact that you just defended Jahan Dotson's name, Jahan Dotson, while saying his name wrong 7 times later. What do you have to say about Take Command?
Okay. Craig, I just think, look, I'm a victim of it too, because no one's a bigger victim than me. I love this team more than anything, okay? I just think that, could we just hold off on this a little bit? Do you think some of these, when y'all do take commands, the players see this, they get a little bit of anxiety of listening to you guys?
No, they don't
because
listen to us.
Because I do know that there's some. You sure? Because I know a lot of guys on the team don't like talking to the media because they just don't like, because of sports radio. And maybe they don't listen to you. Their constituents listen to you, and they're telling them about what's going on.
Okay.
That's all I'm trying to say. Look, Craig, I know you love this team. And I know Logan loves the team. And y'all want to see what's best for this team. And I thought the criticism of Jaden Daniels was valid. I did feel like he could have did better instead of running all the time. And I felt like there were people that should have been open and stuff he should have hit. I agree with that. I just feel like not everything has to be dissect. Some of these kids, they're going to have to learn this.
Mark.
Every time. I'm just saying it.
I know. I promise you, I'm in a good mood. So I'm gonna have some fun with you here. I'm not gonna try to bite your head off.
You asked me.
Hold on, Mark. I did. And you want to know who absolutely loves your point right now?
Who?
Ron Rivera.
You're gonna hang up on me.
No, I'm not going to hang up on you. You want to know who loves your point right now? It's Ron Rivera. Because what your point is all narrative. It's zero substance. You want to know how Jaden Daniels avoids getting, quote-unquote, criticized on Take Command, which is not really criticism. It's analysis of what happened on film.
Right. I agree.
He does the things that – it's not that we're saying it. It's like that's what the play design is. Like if the play is designed to hit – Terry McLaurin on the dagger against 2-man, like just throw the dagger. You want to know who already agrees with that? Jaden Daniels.
Was on him. That long pass, that was on Jaden. That was on him.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of runs. I think there was about 4 or 5 runs he could have passed. And see, what he doesn't understand, and I hope he does this week, you could even see the thing that his legs are so good that he could look like he's going to run, and then someone's going to be open. Why? Because they're going to be so concerned about him running that someone's going to be open. And if he's behind the line, you got a big game.
Well, yeah.
So
that's something that we talked about on Take Command.
But I wasn't talking about Jaden. Emmanuel Forbes did look like he kind of throwed it in. And why doesn't Ben St. Juste look back when the ball's in the air? Why does he never look
Depends
the
on the
ball?
play.
He
On
always
the
plays
first one,
player.
he turned the wrong way. On the second one, he's
But
playing through the hands,
one
which is the correct technique, and that's sometimes you miss, and that's
Greg,
ball.
You got me started. Look, Greg, I love you, man. I do. Look, like I said, I love you. You're a former athlete, just like Logan. Y'all former athletes, and I think y'all are a little bit more lenient than a lot of these guys, these ham and eggers who think they know everything and don't. But you guys understand how athletes think and stuff like that, and you kind of don't want to rip them too hard. But you are correct on what you're saying, and I know a lot of times it's the betterment for the team, and that's all we want to do. And I want this team to win more than anything, and I know you do, and I know Logan does too.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. The funny thing, and Mark, I appreciate it. It was a great call. Some fun back and forth there. I appreciate it. Call back anytime. It's Mark and Largo making our day. And here's what I would say is, like, the funny thing about Mark's call, Anthony, is that I don't love this team more than anything. I'm a hired gun. I've talked about this a million times. Do I want them to do well? Hell yeah, because while my love for the team, if you will, my care for the team, that's actually a more accurate term for it, is completely professionally rooted. I am someone who I'm hired to do this job. I'm not from here. Now, I have great relationships with a lot of people over there. Like, I have so many friends in the area now. I've been here almost 10 years, which is wild to me. So, like, do I want this team to succeed? Yes, but I also want them to succeed because I'm selfish, and winning means that my job is happier on a day-to-day basis. I don't deal with angry callers. I deal with happy ones. It means that the people that I interview and interact with over in the building are happier and just more joyful to deal with. They want to talk more. People like to talk when they win. They hate talking when they lose. Realistically, just cut to the business end of the chase. Our ratings are better when the team is winning. More people are interested. That's the dirty secret of it's not even dirty. That's the clean secret of the radio business, is that everyone thinks that all your local sports talk radio hosts want the team to lose so that we can tear them down. No. That's bad for business, because the pie of people that are interested in a winning team is so much bigger. Nobody cares about, all due respect, sorry, Michael and Will and everybody over in Southeast at Monumental's building, but nobody cares relatively about the Wizards right now because they're bad. And that's why right now they're like, hey, we're going to rebuild something. We're going to take our time while people are not paying attention. Then they're going to wake up one day and be like, wow, we got a good basketball team. This is cool. Like, that's the stated goal. But for the Commanders, like, yeah, I want them to win terribly badly because I'm tired of covering losing teams, and I want all of you to be happy, and it's good for the show. But here's the other part of that coin. That Mark, that is like me poking fun at Mark the caller for the Ron Rivera narrative chasing bit, is I have no control over whether they're good or not. And if I do, that's bad. They're already bad if I have control over their ability to be good or not, because they need to live in the substance of reality, not in the narrative chasing world of whatever the heck we're saying. And so, like, for Take Command, when Logan and I break down the film, we're talking about what's already actually happened, and we're hypothesizing how it could actually get fixed. And so the idea that we have some control over the results on the field is ridiculous. And it's actually something I appreciate about Dan Quinn and Adam Peters and this current group and like Cliff Kingsbury, that dude is not playing media games as a coach. I don't think Joe Witt Jr. gives a rip about what's going on in the media either. And I don't think that was the truth in the last regime specifically. I think they were way too concerned about what media narratives were and were constantly chasing those things versus going, hey, what's going to get the result on the field? And that is what this group is about. And I think that we are having a conversation about them. They exist mostly in a bubble. And yes, do their friends or family or whatever send them clips of stuff? Sure. Are they humans, and does that matter on some level? Yes. But I don't think John Allen is getting out there on 3rd down and 7 being like, I better get after the rusher so that EB doesn't ask me a question about not having a sack on the Junkies tomorrow. That's not how this works. He's out there to play, to win, because they're competitors. And this is where, like, I guess if you have been an athlete at any level, like, that's just, you don't think about narratives when you play. You just play, and you want to win, and you're in it. And then maybe you step back, and it is a kind of a silly thing that we do, that we ask them about the performances in the post-game situations and ask them about, like, what were you thinking in this? What were you doing in that? And help kind of, first draft of history, journalism, highfalutin, the what we do. We try to write that and capture that for posterity. But does it affect, like, that's all after. That's not during. That's not before. And to the extent that stuff is thought of before, it's typically forgotten by the time those guys leave the locker room, they get out on the practice field, and certainly by the time they hit the game field on Sunday. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, I don't even remember what Mark said about Emmanuel Forbes. Do you?
He started defending Jahan Dotson's honor.
That's what it was. Or in his words, Jahan.
Yeah, Jahan.
Yeah. I thought he raised something that was also interesting, that was related, but I'm gonna, one, we'll take more calls. We got time for one or two more. Two, I'm gonna address the giving up on players too early part of Mark's call next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, and always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Stop It show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And streaming live on YouTube, where the chat is lively today, at the Team 980. If you're watching on YouTube and you're like, Craig, where are you? I am in Indianapolis because I was at Fever Aces last night. We're going again tomorrow night because they're playing twice in 3 days, which is why we came up. So really, really cool to see Asia Wilson last night break the WNBA's all-time scoring record in terms of points in a single season, and she continues her MVP campaign. Aces clocked the Fever, who had been the hottest team in the W since the break. Ace is starting to come together. Playoffs are going to be a blast. We're talking about it Tuesdays on the Hoffman W Sports WNBA show, which you can watch on Twitter or subscribe to on the podcast. But local W action, we're talking to Britney Sykes from the Mystics at 6:30 tonight. Right now, though, we continue our coverage of the news of the day, which is that Emmanuel Forbes is going to have wrist surgery. He has a torn UCL in his wrist, the ulnar collateral ligament in his wrist, and his which is also down into the thumb. And that sucks for him. He was out at practice yesterday. You might have seen the video. I think ABC7 had it of Dan Quinn kind of feeling around in his thumb and Emmanuel kind of explaining what's going on. And eventually they decided, like, actually the best thing for right now for him is surgery. Like, let's get this thing done, make sure there's no long-term repercussions here. And in the meantime, we'll figure it out. But Mark and Largo called, and he talked about how he thinks that Adam Peters has given up on Jahan Dotson too early. And for a guy like Forbes, you can't give up on another first-round pick. And we got distracted by the second part of Mark's call and the idea that media narratives can affect play on the field and why that shouldn't be the case. But I did want to respond to the first part of the call. And that response goes something like this. Adam Peters is a trained professional who is making an assessment, not a dude in a box wearing a suit going on vibes. Like, Adam Peters watches the tape. Adam Peters watches practice. Adam Peters is constantly evaluating the person, the professional, the player, everything that he evaluates to decide who is going to make the 53, what value they have to the franchise. And that is literally his job. And by the way, his job is really, really hard. Like, there's a reason he makes seven figures, presumably well into the seven figures, to do that job. And it's because it's hard. It's because there's a lot of factors. You are putting together essentially a 70-piece puzzle, right, between 53 and a practice squad. You're also responsible for all the coaches, so add another 30 people, your front office staff. You're responsible for like 150 people, and you got to make sure you have the right mix of all of that. And on top of the management of 150 people, including multiple direct reports that you're managing your current season, your head coach is reporting to you, your scouting staff, your pro scouts are reporting to you, hey, we should be watching the potential trade for this guy, or hey, this guy just got cut. Do we need a whatever insert position here? Your college scouts, you're trying to make sure that you're not too far behind on the draft, / you're probably going to certain college scouting things during the year to be able to watch games in person and scout. So there's a lot of things that you have to be good at, but at the core of it all, there's the people management of managing an organization, and hence general manager, and can you evaluate football players? And so when you talk about, like, oh, you can't give up on a first-round pick, they didn't give up on him. They made an evaluation that said he shouldn't be here. Like, that was, to take it to whatever business world you live in, that was a performance review. Jahan Dotson didn't pass his performance review. Emmanuel Forbes did. Forbes got a roster spot. Dotson got traded. And I understand that might be a small oversimplification of it, because, the investment you make in someone, the first-round pick, the talent, whatever, but, like, it's actually not. You hire someone, you pay him the money, you make whatever commitment you have to. You do factor that into how easily or not you move on from them because in a salary capped league, there are ramifications for those decisions. And obviously, there is a potential upside of higher picks that is self-evident. The guys get drafted in the first round because they're really talented. And even if you might not have drafted in the first round, it's not like Forbes was actually a fifth rounder. No, he was a guy with tremendous ball skills, anticipation, great length, big size. He competed at a high level in the SEC. He showed some physical toughness, even if he was undersized from a weight standpoint. And the hope was that he would figure out the rest of it in the NFL, and that some of the inconsistency will get more consistent with professional grade coaching. I've talked before how I think the cornerback position is the most coach dependent in the entire sport, and he got terrible coaching in year one. The problems that we were scared of got worse or exacerbated instead of made better, and ultimately we saw the end result, which is he was bad through an entire year, and then he had a bad game one this year when we were certainly hoping to see better. But that is Adam Peters' job, is to evaluate and project the best that he possibly can. This is what this guy is now. This is what I think he can be. He's worth the money we're paying him or not. He's at least a neutral to keep around because, hey, if we cut him, we have dead cap money and we can't really replace him, so we might as well. Because that's the other thing, too, is like, oh, you should move on from Emmanuel Forbes. Cut him. And then what? Sign who? There are some guys out there, veterans, that are available for a reason. Some of those are off the field reasons, and this team's not touching those kinds of guys. Some of them are available because their play declined. Some of them are available because they're not actually ready to play yet because they're hurt. So there's a litany of guys that are out there, and if you can find a diamond in the rough or a vet who just needs a different environment, maybe he wasn't cooked, he just got himself in a bad way, and you can bring that guy in, great. But realistically, you don't find good players, certainly great players, and certainly not building block players in September. You get lucky every once in a while. Every couple of years, you might sign a guy who's a really important piece to your season. You think like what Will Blackman was to this team when he got here after Seattle surprisingly cut him in 2015 is when that happened. And like Will Blackman was a really good piece for this team for multiple years. But those are few and far between. And it's far more likely, frankly, to happen in a position like kicker, which is super finicky. Maybe Austin Seibert all of a sudden is good in the way that Dustin Hopkins, who had bounced around, was all of a sudden good when he got here. And he can solve their kicker problem for multiple years. But to find a corner at a premier position in the middle of September is basically impossible. And so it's not about giving up on or holding on to or any other version of that for these first-round picks. It's about making an evaluation of what they actually are, how good they can be, and whether or not they fit within your franchise, and then making the appropriate move. For Jahan Dotson, that was to trade him. For Chase Young last year, that was to trade him. For Emmanuel Forbes, it was to hope that he could take some of the growth that he had on the practice field to the playing field. It didn't happen in week one. Now he's out allegedly 6 to 8 weeks. We'll see exactly what that timeline looks like when we hear more from Dan Quinn tomorrow. But he's out for a while with this wrist surgery. And hopefully when he gets back on the back end of this, he's been a professional throughout the process. And he can return and play at a high level. And then he's here for the rest of his contract. And then if he's that good, maybe they sign him to another one. That'd be a hell of a story arc. But for right now, patience, waiting, things that we're really bad at, and something that not only are we going to have on the outside, but something that Dan Quinn and company and Adam Peters, in terms of his evaluation, is going to have on the inside as well. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We'll talk a little bit more about what we saw from week one, kind of our last look back, and we'll also look ahead to the Giants with Dan Pizzuta of the 33rd team. We'll take a look around some of the top headlines in the rest of the NFL as well next here on the Team 980. Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. Never read the comments coming up at 5:30. Top headlines of the day at 6 o'clock. But right now it is time for Not My Beat.
From the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in. Not My Beat.
Time for our weekly hit with Dan Pizzuta of the 33rd Team. Dan, what's up, dude? How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well. So I wanted to start a little bit broader with you and then circle back into the Commander stuff, and then maybe we'll see how much time we have left for everything else around the league. But all the rookie quarterbacks struggled in varying forms over the week one weekend. Obviously, Caleb threw for under 100 yards. Bo Nix had a very bizarre day. And then Jaden actually wins Rookie of the Week today, but does it in a way where he struggles some in the passing game, kind of bails himself out with the legs, which is awesome to see the scrambles and how effective he was, but certainly not the long-term strategy that he knows he's looking for, that the team is looking for. Were there any specific through lines that you saw from the rookie quarterbacks that you thought were particularly interesting in week one?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I kind of saw across the board through all three of them, and all three did kind of come with tough defenses. And I think that kind of ended up showing in some of the interior pressure that really got to these guys and really kind of made their jobs a little harder, kind of stopped them from having these clean pockets that they probably, would have liked to work with. Obviously, when you look at like Caleb Williams, the two interior defenders in Tennessee, Jeffrey Sims and Sweat there, they were just kind of running through the interior of the Bears offensive line. And that was kind of one of the concerns that you kind of had with the Bears heading into it, of how strong that interior line was going to be. The Broncos were kind of the same thing. They were going against a Mike McDonald defense that was, showing all the crazy looks that he gave with Baltimore. A lot of, simulated pressures where you have like 6 or 7 guys on the line of scrimmage, but only 4 are coming. But you don't really know which 4. And there were a whole bunch of plays where he was just at the line trying to figure out what the protection should be. And then, you only get a 4-man rush, but then there's still 1 free rusher. There was a lot of that in that game. And I think there was still kind of some of the same things with the Commanders too. I think there was, you go against a Todd Bowles defense that was blitzing a lot. So there was a lot of those kind of protection issues where you're trying to figure out as your first start as a rookie quarterback of where you should be doing some of these protections. And I think kind of all 3 of those guys struggled a little bit. Obviously, Jaden did have those scrambles, so he kind of ended up kind of getting through those a little better than the other 2. But yeah, I think those kind of setting the protection, knowing where some of those were coming from, and then being impacted by that interior pressure, I think that was something we saw with all the rookie quarterbacks in week one.
In terms of the game plan that Cliff Kingsbury put forward, we know it's going to evolve. That is the nature of every single offensive coordinator in the league. Very rarely you're going to get it right in week one, and if you do, defenses will adjust and it'll be wrong by week 5. But what did you make of Cliff's plan in week one, and where do you think they start to tinker as they go into week 2 against the Giants?
Yeah, it was tough. I think it was one of those things where I think they did expect a lot of blitzing to be coming from that defense. So I think with some of the concerns that we kind of talked about last week of how short this offense was in the passing game in the preseason, that kind of came up in week 1. But I do think that was intentionally to kind of stop it from getting some of those pressures to be able to get home. And I think they were able to mitigate that a little bit. And then we did see when there was pressure, he was able to, Jaden Daniels was able to run a little bit. So I think we will see a little more of the downfield stuff open up a little more when you get to a team that's not going to be blitzing, quite as much. The Giants, they do have that interior pressure. Dexter Lawrence was incredible against Minnesota, but they're not going to be a team that's blitzing a lot with the change in their defensive coordinator. They were one of the they had one of the highest rates of just a 4-man rush last week. So I think we will see a little more, and it's a secondary that's definitely not as good. So I do think we'll see a little more pushing the ball downfield, kind of getting to where Jaden Daniels is a little more comfortable with some of those deeper throws. So I do think it was a little disappointing to see how short the offense was again in week 1, but I do think as the season progresses, we will see some of more that deep and intermediate passing kind of go. I just think it was a real tough test in week 1.
No, I totally agree. And, there's some shots that Jaden knows that he missed that were there and available. And you throw those, that A-dot all of a sudden rises pretty significantly. You throw a big number in there. That's how averages work. I don't know a lot about math, Dan, but I do know that. Dan Pizzuta, writer for the 33rd Team, is with us here on the Hoffman Show. I think the bigger surprise, Dan, for obviously most of us was that the defense was as porous as it was, giving up 37 points. And while it wasn't the same as last year, it felt the same as last year in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
What did you see on defense that maybe gives you concern or anything that gives you hope moving forward, that it's like, hey, those are the kind of mistakes maybe you expect in week 1? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but perhaps, for example, like these are week 1 type of mistakes. They'll get it fixed. What did you see from Joe Witt Jr.'s first game as a defensive coordinator?
Yeah, it was one of those things where I think Tampa Bay was just really prepared for what they thought Washington was going to be throwing out, and they did just kind of an excellent job of kind of using some of the rules and the things they thought the coverage they were going to see against them. Tampa Bay was just using a lot of kind of motions to get in, some like trips kind of bunches, and then using the route combinations to get all of these outbreakers that Baker Mayfield does like to throw. And that's where, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, that's where they were really thriving in some of those. So I think they were just kind of using their leverage to kind of find the space in some of the zone coverage that Washington was using. And I think Washington used, one of the highest rates of zone coverage in the league. They were playing a whole bunch of just cover 2 and cover 3. And when you're just kind of that static on defense and not throwing as many different looks as, maybe even we saw during, Dan Quinn's time in Dallas, I think we did see, it was cover 2, but it was dressed up in different ways. And I don't think it was quite that in week 1. So I think, it'll still evolve a little bit. I think as they figure out how to use some of these defensive players and kind of get a little more exotic in some of those coverage looks, but it was just one of those things where it was a bit static in coverage. I think Tampa Bay really knew what they were going to be able to get away with, and then they just kind of spammed that for as much as they could, and Washington didn't really adjust.
Yeah, to me, it was just a game where the defense felt incredibly young, and Tampa did a great job of taking advantage of it, and hats off to them. And, this defense, will it get older as the year goes? Yes, because that is how time works. But they're going to have to figure out how to, as you said, dress it up. Or perhaps, Dan, or add some new pieces. Dan Pizzuta is with us from the 33rd Team, and on the 33rd Team, you wrote an article about free agents NFL teams should sign. You had a wide receiver written down for the Commanders. I will circle back to why you think Jamal Agnew could be a multi-purpose weapon for Washington in a second. However, with the Emmanuel Forbes news 2 hours ago at this point, what corners are available that could potentially be fits in Dan Quinn's system, and could perhaps J.C. Jackson, who you have here, as a good fit in Jacksonville? Would he be the guy that you would put at the top of that list for Washington, or is there someone else on the list that you would think is a better fit if they want to go make a move?
Yeah, I mean, this was a tough article to write because there is not a great amount of, free agents available. Obviously, you don't really have, a lot of star players, sitting around after week 1. J.C. Jackson would be interesting because he does have the aggression that kind of you saw with, Trayvon Diggs and Jerome Bland a little bit, but he is very, hit or miss in terms of some of his coverage. So that might be kind of the boom or bust. I'm not sure if that's something that they're looking for right now. It's tough. I mean, when you're looking at corners, there's Xavier Howard's still out there, but again, he wasn't that great. It's a tough place for them to be sitting in. Jalen Mills maybe is a guy that might kind of have some of that versatility. He's kind of an older guy. It's tough. I don't think there's anyone who's going to come in and be an immediate upgrade, which is kind of, one of those things where you should go into the season kind of being hopefully as deep as you can at some of these positions, because it is a tough thing to fill in even just after week one.
So we're saying, Dan, that the time to build a roster isn't September. That is a thing that I've been trying to get across to people. It's like, I just go sign someone. I'm like, who? It's September.
Yeah.
It's just not how the league works. That said, you did decide to write the article, so now I get to ask you about it. Why do you think Jamal Agnew could be – like, you didn't do one for every team here. You specifically picked the Commanders as one of the 4 or 5 teams you identified, and you picked Jamal Agnew as the player. Why did that stick out as a potential fit for you?
Yeah, when I was kind of going into this article, it was just kind of finding players who I think would be interesting and filling in some weaknesses. And I think, Washington is not right now the deepest at wide receiver, and Jamal Agnew is not a great wide receiver, but I think he can be a useful piece, especially in the way Cliff Kingsbury does like to, run his offense. And Agnew has experience in the slot and outside. He can be that short A-dot, type of player to kind of run in some of those, slot routes and over the middle. I think that could be some of those gadget plays. I think he could be, Rondell Moore never fully worked out in Arizona, but if that is, the type of role that Agnew could fill, I think that is potentially something. And he's been a very good kick returner during his career. And Washington only had 2 kick returns. Both were done by Austin Eckler, and they were fine. But I think if you get someone who might be a little more experienced in there, that can help boost that a little bit if we do see that kick return rate jump up a little bit. So I just think he's, this type of guy that he was going to be cheap, just kind of be one of those, super utility type players. And I think those are kind of the type of players that can help Washington a little bit out at this point in the season.
It's so interesting that you say that, because in camp, they definitely wanted Kaz Allen, the UDFA that was brought in last year from UCLA, to take that role. And they had moved him to running back. They were trying to get it to pop, and then he fumbled in the preseason game, and he just wasn't that guy. So to me, it's pretty clear that they want that body type. They want that skill set. And if Agnew could be that guy, like that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I think so. And it just kind of looked like Austin Eckler wasn't really the most explosive option back there. Just kind of quickly, looking at the returns when I was, watching them this week. So it's just one of those things where it's not going to be, a huge difference, I think. And I still think we're going to see, a tremendous amount of touchbacks with this kickoff, just because of where the starting field position is going to be, and some of the longer returns we did see. I think teams will be just a little more aggressive in kicking into the end zone. So it might not even be like that big of a deal, but I do think that type of guy is someone who, Washington could definitely use.
Yeah, no, it's a good point too on I'd rather give up the 35-yard line than an explosive play. And so I don't even know that the average is going to wind up being – like, touchback might be worse than average, but if you're telling me there's a chance to give up an explosive in a league that is completely designed to not give up explosives, it would make sense that you just take the touchback and go from there. Dan Pizzuta, 33rd team, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Tonight, Thursday Night Football, Dan, you got Bills, Dolphins. They both won in Week 1. It was probably a tougher sledding than either of them wanted in Week 1. How do you feel about each of these two teams? We can go with the Bills first, coming out of their Week 1 performance on the quick turnaround into Week 2.
Yeah, I was really encouraged by the Bills' offense, and I think one of the kind of questions we had is, you get rid of Stephon Diggs. What exactly is this passing offense going to look like? And it was in a way kind of the Patrick Mahomes, I'd say more, 2022 than 2023, but Josh Allen was getting the ball out quickly. It was distributed to a wide range of those wide receivers, which I think is the best case scenario. And then when Josh Allen needed to go hero mode with some of those scrambles, that was still in his bag. So it was very deliberate in the way they were getting the ball out. It was a shorter A-dot, but I think that definitely worked to some of the strengths of what they were doing compared compounded with a run game that I think, worked and should continue to work throughout the season. So there was a very concerted effort to just get the ball out quickly. It was, one of his lowest time to throws in his career. And I think that's something that they can kind of build upon as they kind of figure out many different ways to win, which is a really cool thing about this Buffalo offense. And then you had, the deep shot to Keon Coleman. So I think that's just going to continue to evolve. The defense was a little, up and down, which I think, again, was also working with some new pieces. And I think just Arizona's offense, I think, is going to be decent this year. I think Kyler Murray was doing some good things, and so much of that Buffalo defense was kind of focused on not letting Marvin Harrison Jr. do anything, and they succeeded in that, but that did leave some options for Murray and some of the other, run game options to be running on them a little bit. So I think the Bills defense will continue to improve a little bit, but if this offense has already kind of figured out one way to win, they'll continue to improve. I think that's going to be a very good thing for the Bills going forward.
And then for the Dolphins, I just don't know what to make of week one for them. They pull it out, but because of the Tyreek incident before the game, I just can't imagine the headspace they were in for that one. How much stock do you put into their week one performance? And then, this is kind of the fun part about small sample sizes is we're going to have 2 weeks worth of Dolphins where after one game, their best player got arrested beforehand and went through a fairly traumatic experience with the police, and another player got arrested, and another player was in on the scene. And then it's Thursday Night Football, and Thursday Night Football is not real NFL football because you only have 4 days to game plan. So, what do we even, no matter what happens tonight, do we know anything about the Dolphins after 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think that kind of will depend on what this offense does look like in this game. I think one of the interesting things that I did kind of come away with, or really didn't come away with, is there wasn't a new wrinkle that Miami showed in week one, whether they just didn't get the opportunity or they didn't really have it because they were down early in that game and then kind of had to come back. Well, I think what we've seen from, Mike McDaniel's offense, it was great in that first season. Then it came out at the beginning of last season. We saw all of these new wrinkles, some of the new the passing and the motions and the outside run game that they had. There was not really a change up in what we saw in 2024 now. So I'm wondering if they're still sitting on some things that could kind of change this offense a little bit. I know Mostert is going to be out, so that takes away some of the run game, but I do believe Achane is supposed to play, so that definitely will be helpful. He was very involved in the passing game for that, which I think was a little new, but it was still a lot of, screens and things like that. So it wasn't as much of the downfield. And I think the Jacksonville defense is going to be very good. Tyson Campbell being out now is definitely going to be a bummer for them, but they played the highest rate of man coverage by a wide margin. They were pressing at the line of scrimmage. So I think they were a tough defense for the Dolphins to play in week one. So I'm very interested to just kind of see how this Miami offense is going to evolve, because when they needed to get some of those big plays, they had a big play to Jalen Waddle. They had the 80-yard touchdown to Tyreek Hill. So they were able to pull those out, but it wasn't a very successful game for Miami. I think it was the third lowest success rate Tua has had in the Mike McDaniel era. So that was a very interesting kind of, juxtaposition there between them being able to pull out. But overall, it was not really the Miami offense that we've seen early in the past couple seasons.
Bills, Dolphins tonight on Thursday Night Football. It'll be here on the Team 980 at 8 o'clock after Turf Talks with Coach Locks. Dan, appreciate the time, sir. Thank you kindly, and we will talk to you next Thursday. Great stuff again.
All right, sounds good.
That is Dan Pizzuta with us every Thursday here on the Team 980 from the 33rd team. And Anthony, before I forget, as we bid Dan adieu, and we're talking about Thursday Night Football, should we pick Thursday Night Football so we don't forget at the end of the show? Or are we going to remember at the end of the show?
I'm going to remember.
Are you sure? I'm not going to have to text you at watching, because I don't know that I'm watching tonight, because we're in Indy and I don't know what we're doing. I don't know where I'm going to be
watching tonight.
Okay, so if all of a sudden we forget, because that's what happened last week, last week we extra messed up because we were supposed to do our Super Bowl picks at the end of the show, and then we messed that up. But I got it in before, like the second drive of the game. So I was like, I got Chiefs tonight. I got Chiefs to win it all, and then I just don't want to forget tonight. Is basically the moral of this story.
I got you, big dog.
Okay. Again, Thursday Night Football tonight here on the Team 980. Terps talk with Coach Locks coming up at 7 following us. When we get back, oh boy, it's Never Read the Comments. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980, which is let's call it pertinent to this segment, Anthony, because I do believe it's about that time, 5:30 on a Thursday. They told us not to, but
We tried to warn them. They didn't listen.
Yeah!
Every week, the Hoffman Show goes into the belly of the beast.
We read those comments, baby.
Never read the comments.
all right, so we chopped the show up into digestible pieces for you. If you can't catch the whole thing live, all 3 hours streaming at the Team 980. Or perhaps even you're driving around listening to something on the radio. You want to go find it on YouTube because you couldn't call in at the time and you want to get your comment in. I don't know how everybody gets their comments in, but the point is, y'all leave comments on our YouTube page, at Craig Hoffman, at the Team 980, and then we respond to them here on the radio. One of the big, most commented on pieces, segments that we've done of radio over the past week is on Jaden Daniels and whether or not he scrambled too much in his debut against the Bucks. I actually thought this was a good comment from Sean Adams. I would say mad about the right things, not mad about the wrong things, and some perspective. Sean says, short answer, yes. Long answer, he did what needed to be done to keep several drives alive. Number one, if they do not send him to the Nationals to learn how to slide one day each week, what are they doing? We have an MLB team right here. Learn how to slide so we can keep him for a while. Number two, if that equipment manager doesn't super glue that damn helmet on, zero excuse for it popping off like that. Number three, he will get more comfortable when the game slows down for him, especially in the passing game. He had some open receivers and just either didn't see them or missed them. The final thing I will say is that despite the shortcomings, he still performed the best out of the top three rookie QBs in week one. Let's hope he continues his growth and has a great game against the Giants. Anthony, Sean, if I'm out, you get to host the show. We got to keep the helmet on. I'm not as upset about the sliding thing, but it's okay. Perspective on, hey, he did the best he could, but he's got to get better. That's not what most YouTube comments are. That was good. It had perspective. Good job, Sean.
We love those kinds of, thoughtful responses or, just comments in general.
Yeah.
Are there any more?
No, not many. Not many. I just, I thought it was good to start the segment that way. As
Okay.
A way to
On a high note.
Yeah, we want to.
Okay.
You got to have carrots and sticks, right?
Yes.
We got to reward the good behavior. Hey, Sean was passionate. He had thoughtfulness. He addressed a couple of different things, but he was generally on topic. That's how it's done. Now let's get to all the people that we're giving attention because they're Looney Tunes. Not all of them are Looney Tunes. We were talking about obviously all aspects of the game on the Take Command film review. So we got a bunch of comments on that. Jamel James 4835 says, my biggest problem is that BSJ is just as bad as Forbes, but Forbes is in his second year. BSJ has looked like he will say, Anthony, this is pretty funny. He used a donkey emoji because he thinks he's looked like booty.
That's actually
that's really funny.
That's actually
he's looked bad for years, but all the attention is going to Forbes. Jamel, I don't think that's correct. I think plenty of people, including you, are complaining about Benjamin St. Juste. I think the difference is when Forbes was getting beat, he was not in the picture. He was committing penalties because he's not trusting the technique. Benjamin St. Juste has been on the wrong end of a lot of dudes making plays where he is he could also be the one to make the play. So I don't want to fully exonerate him and say, because I feel like sometimes I will fully own we here as I'm someone who has said this before. We'll be like, oh, there's nothing else he could have done. Just you got to tip your hat to the other guy. And it's no, he could have made a play. The other guy made a play on him. He was generally in the right position where often that ball falls incomplete because it's too difficult of a play to make for the other guy. But if the other guy's Mike Evans, that's going to be really hard because that guy's going to make that play. And so you then have to up his make a play by making a play yourself. So I do think that it's worth saying that. Whereas Forbes, it's like wrong leverage, wrong technique, wasn't in the right spot, didn't give himself a chance to make a play. Where BSJ is in the right spot and has to make one. So they're different. And I think the way those guys have, I presume by the way coaches talk about them, like paid attention in meetings or practiced or, been generally as professionals, it seems like there's some sort of chasm there. Maybe it's a small sliver and it's a significant but small, and maybe it's a huge difference. But I do think that's important to point out. With that said, both of them have to play better in the long run, or they're both going to get replaced as soon as this offseason. Obviously, things complicated now by the Forbes injury that came out today, or that he's going to have surgery today. But I do think, they have results-wise been similarly poor, but the reasons why are different, and the reasons why point to how easy or not it will be to ultimately get it corrected in the long term. On our Tell the Truth Monday segment, let's see, who was this that commented? Jack Tupp, 4358. Sup, Jack? Jack says, the truth, and Tell the Truth Monday, is Jonathan Allen and Terry McLaurin are blue chip players. And like so many other blue chip players on this team before them, their talent was wasted by terrible coaches and horrible schemes or meddling by a terrible owner. We've been in a rebuild for over 2 decades. The majority of that was under the worst owner, certainly in franchise history, but maybe even NFL history. Game 1 of year 1 under the completely new owners and coaches just isn't going to tell us much of anything. Anthony, I've made a grave mistake here. I've included 2 good comments in Never Read the Comments this week.
There it is.
I'm going to start thinking that reading the comments is a good idea.
It might just be.
No, it's not. Do not. What are you trying to do? Destroy me? Oh, yeah, it is, Craig. Just spend all your time in there. It'd be great for your mental health.
You were, praising these guys for, such great comments. Maybe we should spend.
Maybe I've hit enough hide user on channel for some of the really bad ones that I've just weeded out the bad ones. Maybe I've self-selected. So if you could still leave a comment, congratulations, you've passed the test. But I think this is what I will say, and why I actually wanted to pick this out is not just I thought it was good perspective on like, hey, yes, it is okay to say this is game 1 of year 1 and we don't know anything yet. But Terry and John are not blue chip players. With all due respect to those guys who I think are awesome and I really, really like. To me, blue chip means you're top 5 at your position. And I don't think John has been top 5. Like, I think there was like a year stretch where John might have been top 5 at his position. I think Duran is closer to top 5, frankly, than John at this point. Maybe I would love nothing more than John Allen to be like, I'll show you, and I'll show everybody. But it shouldn't have to come from hearing someone on the radio say it. I still think John's probably like top 10 of the position. It's not like he stinks. He's really good. He's an awesome football player. But are you consistently week in, week out, top 5 at your position? And, Terry is definitely not that, even if I think he could have a top 5 type season if you put him with, I don't know, Patrick Mahomes. But, being more scheme proof and things like that are what make you that kind of guy. So both things can be true. I don't think we learn a lot about where this team is in week 1. Certainly where they're going to go. We don't learn that a lot because week 1 is a gigantic crapshoot for everyone. It's more crapshooty if you have not been together as a team. I think they probably enhanced their own or dehanced their own performance, if you will, by not playing a whole lot in the preseason. So there's a lot of different factors, but we also should just be realistic about this roster that the best players on it are exceptional football players, but there is just a different level that those top 5 guys are on. And I don't think that we've had a top 5 player at their position in Washington, not named Trent Williams or Tress Way, who's a punter, in a long time. Certainly not multiples at once. I guess you could have argued maybe there was a year of crossover where, Trent and Sheriff together both were top 5. Like, was Sheriff a top 5 guard at the same time Trent was a top 5 tackle? I don't know that Brandon ever quite got there. He's certainly one of the best. And, he and Trent were really, really good and part of some good O-lines. But outside of those two, like even Ryan Kerrigan. Like Ryan Kerrigan was awesome. Now Ryan Kerrigan's catching strays. Sorry, Ryan. Like Ryan Kerrigan was awesome. Double-digit sack guy, super consistent, professional as all hell. He wasn't one of the best 5 pass rushers in the NFL, one of the best 5 edges in the NFL. Like he wasn't Von Miller in the time that Von was that guy. He's not what Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons are now. 11 sack guy is very different than 14 sack guy. So I just think that we have to be realistic about the difference in greatness from a truly great red chip, if you will. Let's say somewhere between 6 and 20, depending on the position. Obviously, like tackles, there's 2 on every team that start. Wide receivers, you're going to have a little bit more depth, etc. And a true blue chip like Justin Jefferson, Chris Jones, what Aaron Donald was his entire career. There's just a different level there. And outside of Tress at punter, who I think has been one of the best 5 punters in the NFL for a long time, and when Trent Williams is the best tackle or one of the 5 best tackles in the league, guys like Joe Thomas were still in the league then, but certainly one of the best 5. Anthony, I don't even know if most people remember what that looks like.
I would make the argument for Sam Cosmi right now at right guard, but that's about it.
He's probably the closest. I don't know that. To
I was
me,
looking
like
at
a blue chip guy is pretty unanimous, and
yeah.
There's enough. Like when Fowler did the ESPN survey and he didn't make the top 10, I was like, whoa, because he's definitely in some people's top 5s, and I do think he's slept on. But like if execs around the league aren't saying his name enough that he doesn't crack that top 10. Like, I think they're wrong, but, like, the point would be that it's a no-brainer. Like, Aaron Donald was never left off that list.
Yeah.
And so I do think there's a chance by the end of the season that Cosmi is there, and then he starts to, he just got paid, he gets some more recognition. Sometimes the recognition comes after the reality in terms of if you were to watch every guard in the league and grade it out. Mm-hmm. But I also don't think he's been so thoroughly dominant that he is a no-brainer. But he's probably the best. He's probably, outside of Allen Payne and McLaurin, the guy who has the best case on this team, and certainly is the guy that has the best chance to elevate to that based off his age and career trajectory.
For sure.
All right, continuing on, never read the comments here on the Hoffman Show. We got. Did I put another one? Man, I put a lot of good comments in on this week. Mr. Swervon, frequent commenter. People will say they didn't do enough, but can't even give a logical take. I'm talking about the offseason here. People will say they didn't do enough, but can't give a logical take on who they would or should have or could have gotten in free agency. A lot of our fans want to spend money just to spend money. Building a team means nothing to them. They think it's Madden and everything just gels. Philly had a roster already. Texans took 3 years. Lions took 3 years. And Giants, along with us, played a very easy schedule. We all could have made the playoffs that year. Talking about when, the Giants made the playoffs in year 1 with Shane and Dable. The caller had referenced that specifically in the segment that he was commenting on. Yes. That is correct. Like, everyone wants to pretend like the Houston Texans were built in a year. No, the Houston Texans were built over the course of multiple years. In the second year, depending on when you want to give the start date of the rebuild, they fired their coach and drafted not just 1, but 2 players in the top 5 because they decided that they were ready to launch. And they got in that one of those picks, C.J. Stroud, who was the most pro-ready quarterback that's apparently come out in a long, long time. Something they were right about, more right than anybody or than a lot of other teams, including the Carolina Panthers, who had a chance to take him and didn't. They took Bryce Young instead. But like, they were right, but they had built an infrastructure. They had guys like Laramie Tunsil. Talk about top 5 tackles. Like, Laramie Tunsil is a blue chip player. So they already had that guy in place. They had some guys defensively that were really good, and then they obviously bring in D'Amico, and they had been building towards a certain style, and voila, they do it. Teams like the Lions took multiple years. The Lions stunk Dan Campbell's first year. Everyone was laughing at him because he's talking about eating kneecaps, and they weren't very good. And then all of a sudden, I think it was back half of his second year, they were one of the best teams in football coming down the stretch. They knock Aaron Rodgers out of the playoffs in his final game in Green Bay. And then next, they just continue that hot streak through last season, and now here they are starting 1-0, one of the favorites once again. And so you think about some of the teams that have early success and on rebuilds, and the reality is you probably just weren't paying attention to the first couple of years of their rebuilds. You're much more likely to have a Lions or even like the 49ers, right? Which is the model here because, well, Adam Peters is a part of it. Like, they weren't that good in 2017. But they had guys like, what's his name? Logan Paulson, who came in, and Logan helped set the foundation and be like, this is what it means to be a pro. George Kittle, young tight end who's been brought in, and man, this kid looks pretty good. And a guy like Logan helped make sure that they got the absolute best out of George Kittle. And look what's happened to George Kittle. Not that Logan deserves any significant credit for that, but I'm sure George would give Logan some sort of credit for being like, oh, I saw how that guy came to work every day. And also, they probably knew that was within George Kittle because they scout really well. And so it took a while, and they had some missteps along the way in terms of, they messed up the Trey Lance thing and other things that they got right and wrong along the way. But if you take the time and build it right, not only are you having a chance to be really good, but you have some resiliency. Like, San Francisco messed up the Trey Lance thing and still has been to multiple Super Bowls. That's really hard to do. Not just miss on a top 5 pick, but trade up for that pick, give up assets, and still have the resiliency, still do well enough in your scouting in other places, still have the schematic advantage because Kyle Shanahan's really good at his job to overcome that. Like, that's big-time stuff. And so if that's the model, yeah, it might take a couple years. It didn't take forever in San Francisco, but it's definitely going to take a couple. And by the way, that San Francisco team had some pieces that were left over from the previous iteration of them being good that helped them launch a little bit faster than the Washington Commanders, who tore down their entire roster basically, had very few players, and all the players that remained had barely ever been on a winning team in the NFL. So starting about 6 feet under, if you ask me, on this whole rebuild thing, having to fill in some gaps and then build. You got to almost build a foundation underneath the foundation. That's kind of what is happening right now. Then there's the Emmanuel Forbes thing, which we obviously talked about earlier in the week. Anthony, I feel like we should still do the Forbes comments, even though this is everything has changed because of the injury, but they were interesting. Go ahead and do these. Okay, Anthony's giving me. Anthony in his green shirt is giving me the green light. What shirt you got on there? Which polo?
That's my middle school. Oh. WJA. There it is, baby.
Okay. Just wondering. Anthony's a big polo guy. Anyway, Emmanuel Forbes, he plays cornerback for the Commanders, and he did not play particularly well on Sunday. And the comments had things to say. Jimmy Z 2098, Forbes absolutely sucks. Get rid of him now. This guy will never be an NFL starting cornerback. He can't cover anybody decent. I think you meant decently. You can't really fix that. Sure, with time, he might get a little better, so it'll go from horrible to just really bad. And the reason I identified that comment is because it's literally back-to-back with this one from Joshua BO2 in. Says, Darius Slay played so bad his rookie year he was benched. Lots of other examples like that in the league. Yeah. Patience. It's something that is in short supply in the universe. It is something that is in short supply in the NFL, but having some can pay off. And again, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn are trained professionals designed to know whether patience is worth having. We're all going to have patience now with this injury, but then you got comments like this. Yonel, wait a second. I didn't read this screen name beforehand. El Yonel. Do we think this is a Linnell Willingham pseudonym?
I'm not going to lie. I thought that's what you were getting at.
El Yonel? Linnell.
Yonel, yeah.
We're on to you. Come on, Willingham. You got to be more creative than that. If you're going to have burner accounts, let's at least make them good. I don't think it's Linnell. Anyway, El Yonel 6524 says, I'm so tired of hearing all the excuses for Forbes. Everybody wants to blame Jack Del Rio as if he couldn't develop him. Well, what's the excuse going to be if he does this all year? Dude tried to jump for an interception. He could have easily batted the ball down. Either way, he'll never be a shutdown corner, more like a gamble corner like D Hall, and that's it. His confidence is gone. You can see it in his play, not what he says. Don't invite Fred Smoot to any more draft days because homeboy is dookie. We got D Hall catching strays. We got Fred Smoot catching strays. And we got Emmanuel Forbes just catching whatever the heck that was.
God dang.
And he said the word dookie.
I have no words.
I could see that, which makes for great radio, let me tell you.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's making – it's not excuses. Like, there's reasons. He was poorly coached. It's really hard. And if he can't figure it out with multiple coaches, then multiple things can be true. Jack Del Rio could have been a bad defensive coordinator by the end of his time in Washington. Defensive backs coaches here could have been bad. And also, Emmanuel Forbes might also be bad. They clearly weren't good at picking talent, the last regime. So multiple things might be true at once. It's not excuses. It's just, that's life. Especially life in the NFL. It's hard. If everyone was great at drafting, nobody would miss. And we know that the miss rate in the NFL draft is really, really high. But then you get comments like this from Wham Bam 21. Wham! Last year counts. The film is the film. And I responded, Anthony, by going, counts means what? Film is the film, but it requires context. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. And this comment legitimately cracked me up because this is peak internet take right here. Ready for this one? No other team or any coach on this staff, for that matter, is going to say, well, last year didn't count because Ron Rivera was the coach. He's been extremely bad in man-to-man situations and as a tackler. Bad coaching or not, he's the player, and that's his film. The only reason you're giving him a 2-game leash is because you're going off last year partly. Here's the problem with Wham Bam 21 comment that no other team or any coach on this staff was going to say last year didn't count and give Emmanuel Forbes a chance. The people in charge are giving him a chance. You are literally factually wrong on the very substance basis that you are basing your very silly internet take on. That, no one else would give him a chance. Everyone else in the league would have done the same exact thing this team did, which is say, he's a first-round pick, he's under contract, let's see what we can do. And they're going to continue to develop him. And that is a thing that is really hard for players when they're in the spotlight to admit, like, hey, I'm being developed right now. I'm more of a project. No player is ever going to say it. No coach is ever going to say it, especially one that's getting reps in real time. But the idea that no one else would do this, no one would give him a chance, when he's literally getting one, now obviously sidebarred or sidetracked by injury, it really undercuts the argument when that's just literally not the facts on the ground. Right in front of our faces. Okay, funny ones to end it, Anthony. On your continued Josh Allen take, where you think he's overrated, he's not in your top 5.
Yep.
George Garnavos says, no offense, I mean this as nicely as possible. If Allen isn't your top 4, you are smoking crack. To which I responded, wow. That escalated quickly.
That did escalate really quickly. Yeah. No matter what he
say, you're not smoking crack, Anthony. I think that's
well,
the
that
first
too.
thing Anthony, just for,
yes,
for
I
the record,
don't do that.
Anthony is not smoking crack.
No, I'm not.
His bad football
Josh
takes
Allen
come
is
completely
still
sober.
Not in my top 5.
Okay, just a very sober.
Just mine. Just mine, though. Just mine.
And then Trell Riddick says, Michael Phillips, on our hit with Phillips from Monday, Michael Phillips is just trying to feed us BS, LOL, be a realist, man. But he spelled realist, REALEST. As in, like, yo, that dude is the realist.
The realist.
Not as in, like, hey, stop being in fantasy land, be a realist. So, of course, I responded, Michael Phillips is the realist. Look it up. Look it up.
With the EST, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like,
because they meant the IST.
Because you already know Michael Phillips clearly is the realist. And by the way, that's the first time that's ever been said about Michael Phillips. All right, when we get back here on the Hoffman Show, Anthony's still, you caught some strays on the internet this 2 week, buddy. When we get back, our top headlines of the day from Command Land. Joe Witt Jr. and Cliff Kingsbury spoke, plus the major injury that is changing the course of the Commanders season. We talk about it all in our Pick 6 at 6 here on the Team 980. show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up in 25 minutes from right now, we will be joined, because 2 Syracuse folks on one show is not enough, Anthony. The industry standard is 3. Those are the rules. I don't make them.
I don't either.
So we're going to welcome in a third Orange woman. In this particular case, we're going to welcome in Britney Sykes from the Washington Mystics, fresh off an absolute dismantling of the Chicago Sky last night. Now they are just 1 game behind Chicago for the 8th and final playoff spot. So we'll talk to Slim coming up at the bottom of the hour, a.k.a. 6:30, because I'm not supposed to say bottom of the hour anymore because allegedly no one knows what that means. Anyway, it's time for our Pick 6.
The 6 biggest Commander storylines.
It is caught!
Delivered at 6 o'clock sharp. It's the Pick 6 at 6.
We set out to find a leader, someone who could take this franchise to the next level and build an elite team that consistently competes for championships.
Anthony, let's go ahead and hit number 1, please.
Number 1.
So I think by this point you probably know in the day what the top storyline is, and that is that Emmanuel Forbes is going to miss some time with the UCL injury, the ligament in his thumb that is going to require surgery. Could be 6 to 8 weeks is kind of one of the numbers that I've seen floating around. We'll obviously see if there is more information that comes out in the next 24 hours. By this time tomorrow, Dan Quinn will have spoken again, so we should know more. But Forbes is out for the foreseeable future. They will have to figure out what they want to do behind him. Noah Igbenogany is who played last week. Michael Davis was active last week, who was their free agent acquisition in the offseason, who was expected to battle Forbes and St. Juice in training camp, and he just frankly wasn't that good. Igbenogany was much better. You have guys like Chigozie and Newsium, you could call it from the practice squad. There are a couple of veterans out there. We talked through some of those options at 5 o'clock with Dan Pizzuta of the 33rd team. But there's no one, you can't get good football players in September. Starters aren't available. It's just not a thing. Now, you might sign someone who might wind up starting, and certainly that guy or any of the guys I just named can play better than Emmanuel Forbes did last week, but that's because Emmanuel Forbes had a bad week. Emmanuel Forbes could also play better than Emmanuel Forbes played last week, and you have to imagine he would have against not Mike Evans, against not Chris Godwin, and against not Baker Mayfield. Not that Baker's amazing, but Daniel Jones is lower down the ladder. So it's a huge bummer. Obviously, it's more than a bummer for him personally because that's ouch. That really freaking hurts. But the surgery is to come, and the Commanders are going to have to figure out not only who replaces him in the short term, probably Igbenogany, but what the longer-term prognosis is. And I mentioned this earlier in the show. I think it's a big couple of weeks for Forbes here to show the professionalism, to attack this rehab, to be attentive in meetings, to be a great teammate, and show, hey, I'm still bought in. I know that I didn't have a great first week. I know that I, didn't perform the way I want to, but when I come back, I want my starting job back, and I'm going to be better because I'm going to show you how locked in I am during this rehab, and I'm going to try to be a good teammate and help in the meetings and in the film room, and I'm going to get better even though I can't go out and do it on the practice field, nevertheless in games. So it's a huge couple weeks for Emmanuel Forbes, and we'll see where this team is when he gets back, because if Igbenogany is playing great, you just stick with him. If he's not, how many guys have they gone through? So there's a lot of questions, a lot of time, and rather than speculate on a million what-ifs and possibilities, let's keep things moving and hear from Joe Witt Jr., number 2.
Number 2.
So obviously 2 huge things defensively. Tackling, a.k.a. finishing, and the communication. Those were the bugaboos on Sunday. Let's start off with the tackling. I'm going to guess the answer to this could have been a very short no. The question to Joe Witt Jr. was the tackling up to your standard on Sunday, Joe Witt Jr.?
We missed more tackles than I was anticipating. We were a step short. And that's one thing that we're talking about. Take the extra step. There was a play on the sideline. We had two of our real good players miss a tackle, and it shouldn't happen. I mean, we got to take an extra step. And when I say it shouldn't happen, that means we have to do a better job. In practice these days, you don't go to the ground, so we have to make sure we're getting our bodies in position every practice, running to the ball, getting the bodies in position to get people on the ground. So no, it wasn't to the standard.
I love that not only is he saying it's not to the standard, because no coach is going to get up there and be like, yeah, I was actually, it's week 1. It happens. Like, no coach is going to say that. Duh. But to have the specificity of, like, this is what we need to do, like, he knows so clearly what is wrong that it just oozes out of him. I love that. And not that everything – I try not to be so much of a theater critic that, if a coach doesn't say something like that, doesn't mean he doesn't know it, like as long as he knows it on the practice field. But I do appreciate the fact that they are identifying this and saying, like, hey, this is a technique thing. It's not a, hey, our guys need to try harder. It is simply we did not do a good job of making sure that they understood what they needed to do. We have made it very clear to our guys this week, and I would imagine that clarity in the coaching. Like, if you got a coach that's telling you 16 different coaching points, it's hard to focus on one. Hey, man, when you're in pursuit of the ball, take that extra step. So as Frankie Louvu's, processing the information, and Bobby Wagner's processing the information, and they get in the mode where they're in chase and tackle, it's going to be like, take that extra step. It's going to be fresh in their mind. That's good coaching. And so I'm excited to see if they can turn it around on Sunday. That was the biggest problem on the front end. The back end.
Number 3.
Yeah. Talkie. Need more talking and effective talking. So how do you fix the communication? Joe Witt Jr. talking about that today in Ashburn.
Just like I said, the manning in the walkthroughs, making sure I stood way back, the walkthrough we just had, and I told him, I'm way back here. I got to hear it. So you have to scream it. It has to be loud, all right? I don't want to hear, I don't have one player to say, I didn't get it, okay? So communication is sent, received, and acknowledged, okay? So it's not only I said it, it's not good enough. You have to make sure he's received it, he's acknowledged it, and now we're on the same page. And so that's the key part of it. It's just making sure that we're doing it and not taking anything from granted, which we didn't, okay? But when you don't get the results that you're expecting, all right, you have to look at what you're doing to make sure.
If I was a player in that meeting, and I'd be curious, I wish I'd heard that quote before we taped the Take Command preview this morning, which now all of a sudden is going to feel a little silly because we're not going to talk about anything Emmanuel Forbes adjacent, which is a big story, but plenty of good information on there in there on the Giants. But I might just call Logan later and ask him this, or talk to him tomorrow and ask him this. Like, if you're a player in that meeting and you say, well, hey, Joe, what happens if I get a piece of, like, I imagine if you're Mike Sainristil, right? And the safety tells you something on a check. You go to relay it to your outside corner. Your outside corner doesn't acknowledge that he receives it. Like, now I'm caught in no man's land. How do you deal with that? Like, that's a good question from a player, and I would hope that somebody asks it. I hope that player's Mike Sainristil, to be honest. But like, you have to have solutions for all of that. Of like, okay, hey, if our rules of communication are send, receive, acknowledge, what happens if we get stuck at receive? Do we default back to the original call? Because the biggest problem is not being stuck in a bad call. This is really the point of this, right? If your optimal call is to switch to cover 3 and you're stuck in cover 2, it only becomes an insolvable problem if half of you are playing 2 and half of you are playing 3. Because now you've got a bust. Or like, hey, we're switching in man-to-man, or we're not switching in man-to-man. I've got the inside guy. No, I've got the inside guy. You've got the outside guy. If you're on different pages, that's asking for a coverage bust. Then you're going to have a wide open area of the field. If you are supposed to be in cover 3, but you all are playing cover 2, at least you have sound cover 2. And you might have a bad look, and that might be hard, and you might lose that one with the pen and give up a 15-yard completion, but at least you didn't give up a touchdown. And you just got to communicate better next time. And that's stuff you can live with as a coach versus, hey, they did a good job. They had a quick motion and we didn't get it communicated fast enough, but at least we stayed on the same page versus, I said this. He didn't get it. I don't know, coach. What do you want me to do? Like, I told him. Like, no, send, acknowledge, or send, receive, acknowledge. So they have a plan, and I'm sure they have solutions for kind of that in-between space too, because if I'm the Giants or I'm any other team and I saw what some of the late jet motions that Tampa used did to this defense and the inability to communicate, like I am testing them in a major way this weekend. When we get back, you'll hear from Cliff Kingsbury on the offensive side of our pick six. What did he make of the amount that Jaden Daniels took off and run, and what is his game plan going into week 2 against New York? More pick six next on the Hoffman Show. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And let's keep things rolling. In our Pick 6 at 6, the top storylines of the day from the Commanders. We went through some of the defensive headlines, including Emmanuel Forbes being done for a while with the wrist injury and needing surgery. Let's get to the offensive side.
Number 4.
Cliff Kingsbury talking to the media today and was asked very simply what his biggest takeaway was from Jaden Daniels' performance and what he can learn from his first ever game as a pro.
Hold on, technical difficulty.
Oh, it sounds like we've got technical difficulties. My favorite. And we have more technical.
The competitive spirit, I think, just to watch how he continued to fight, especially at the end. I called one of the worst plays I've ever called in my entire career, and he just took the ball and ran into the end zone, and it's like he was not going to be denied there on the goal line, and it says a lot about him in that situation. A lot of people would not have taken that opportunity to drive that ball down and then put it in the end zone, and he wanted the ball in his hands and wanted to score. So that was exciting to see. I think every day he gains more and more credibility in the locker room with his work ethic, his attention to detail, and then the competitive spirit is as good as I've ever been around.
Anthony, did Cliff clarify what he meant about the worst play of his career? That next bite, and what he means by that? I think that was followed up on. Can we play that? Do you have that available? Sorry to spring that on you last second.
Yeah, I got it.
Because I'm curious what Cliff means by that. I think I know, but I want to hear it from his mouth.
Just playing, that you have to play to even come close to simulating what a live NFL game is in season on Sundays. And I thought, like I said, his operation to not have any pre-snap penalties, to only have 2 penalties overall. One of them probably shouldn't have been a penalty, was really good. No play clock violations. I thought he handled himself well, and as he plays, the game will continue to slow down. But, as far as the play, I called basically a speed option with no check, and they overplayed it to one side, so he just stuck his foot on the ground and got in the end zone with, the highest paid safety in football chasing him and just found a way in. So it says a lot about, we knew he likes to compete, but it definitely showed on Sunday.
I think that's really cool from Cliff to admit that. Because a lot of people criticized him for that play call because Jaden wound up taking an extra hit and you're down late in that game. And, while it's great to be like, oh, look, the competitor. It's like, yeah, but we need that competitor. Can he not get smashed going into the end zone? And what Cliff is saying there is like, we should have called something. If we're going to call that play, like if he can walk into the end zone, fine. But to not have another option for him, and so he has to wind up taking it. They force him to not pitch it, and, he takes that hit. Like, good that Cliff learns from that. Dan Quinn talks about the lessons, and that's a lesson of like Cliff has got to make sure that he manages Jaden and you don't get caught up in the game, or that you're thinking about some of this bigger picture stuff with him because he's the future of the franchise. And if Cliff is already being like, yeah, that was pretty dumb on my part, like, yeah, you don't want that to happen in the first place, but since it did, how do you handle it? I actually love that from Cliff Kingsbury, a guy who, by the way, I'm very stunned he said that out loud because Cliff normally gives you absolutely nothing in the media. All right, speaking of Jaden running.
Number 5.
How did Cliff interpret the 16 carries that Daniels took on Sunday?
Yeah, I think there's a couple calls, where we thought we had premier looks that ended up hitting inside that you'd like to have back. If he walks in, then it looks really good. But a lot of those, he did a great job. I'm not sure how many actually got contacted and taken to the ground on, but he does a great job finding the soft spot, finding out of bounds. But we understand, like, he has to take care of himself, and we want him to continue to grow, and you can't do that if you're banged up and on the sideline.
And, of course, part of that is on the offensive line, wrapping up the pick 6 here.
Number 6.
What did Cliff think of the offensive line, and if the quarterback scrambling as much as he did makes him change the way that he calls plays at all?
Yeah, it's a really good front, and like I said, a few of those were first read and get out, as your first game as a rookie, and he knows he has a lot of faith in his legs, and I would too if I could run like that. So he made some plays early and got out of there, but I thought they battled against a really good front, and no pre-snap penalties. I don't know how many holds they had. I don't think many. And so I thought that was, from an execution standpoint, played a clean game. I mean, we can all get better, coaches and players, but I thought as a group they played an efficient game.
I don't disagree. Like, a couple of bad snaps in there for sure, but that happens. And I think they did a good job of limiting the exposure of that offensive line. He didn't really directly answer the question in terms of whether it changes, but it sounds like it's something he's thinking about, which is good because he's got a rookie quarterback in an offensive line that, well, not, I think, the worst in the league in the way that a lot of national people were scared it was going to be, is definitely not the best in the league either. In fact, we don't even know who is going to be on the line every series. Right now, Cliff asked, the last thing we'll play for you here in the Pick Six, are we going to see this continued rotation of Brandon Coleman and Cornelius Lucas, or what's going on there? Cliff?
I think everybody would like that, where it's pretty defined, but both those guys had earned the right to play in that game, and felt like we had a good rotation going, and Brandon's an ascending player and continues to get better, and Luke's been doing this a long year, and so there's some comfort there. But, yeah, I think eventually you'd like to have your five that you can roll out there together and build that kind of unity.
The thing about having a five is you got to have five that can actually stay on the field the entire time. And while that's, obviously offensive linemen get hurt in the NFL, just like everyone else does, and it can't be guaranteed, you want to make sure that you don't exacerbate that problem by doing something stupid, like playing a rookie who hasn't had a full training camp, a full complement of snaps, because he's not in shape to do so. And so this is, to me, something they're doing out of necessity. It's pretty clear that Coleman is just not ready to play a full complement of snaps yet, especially considering they want to play with pace. And so making sure that, they get him up to speed in the proper, loading is essential to prevent him from getting hurt again, which is why he's not, able to play this full complement of snaps in the first place. That's our Pick Six. 6 biggest headlines, 6 biggest things to know from the day out in Ashburn. We do it Wednesdays and Thursdays at 6 p.m. On Fridays, our Pick Six takes a little bit of a different turn. We pick the 6 most interesting players that we're going to keep an eye on in Sunday's game. So we'll do that tomorrow. Next here on the Hoffman Show today, Britney Sykes, guard for your Washington Mystics. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Right now, it is our pleasure to welcome in Mystics guard Brittney Sykes. Slim, what's up? Good to talk to you.
What's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm good. And by the way, I have to pass on a quick message. I was told if I call you Britney Sykes, then you would know who that message is from.
From AC?
Yep. That is exactly correct.
Wow.
She says hello.
She's the only one who get away with that.
Yeah, we're actually. I'm in Indianapolis right now with my wife. We were at the Fever game last night, the Fever Aces game. So we had lunch with AC today. She says hello. First of all, second of all, Slim, I looked up at the scoreboard in the middle of that game that I was obviously at and went, "Oh my God, Washington is absolutely murdering the Sky right now." Y'all put on one hell of a performance last night. And my question to you about it is, we see so often in the W and the NBA, the games are so long, a team gets up, and then inevitably the other team comes back. How were y'all able to stay so focused last night that early margin that you get just keeps growing and growing until the final score is as wide as it is by the end?
I mean, I think it's just, excuse me, that hunt for that level of consistency through the entire game. We've been on and off. We've had, like, we call them like pockets. We have pockets in the games where we're like going to a slump, and that'll come, to bite us in our ass. So we've just been learning and growing and figuring out how do we get those pockets to become longer, become quarters now to becoming like 40-minute games.
Is that something that you've heard from other coaches before, or that you really are aware of where that comes from? Because the reason I'm asking is that is exactly how, on the Wizards side of the building, Michael Winger and Will Dawkins talked about how they evaluated things. And I'm wondering if that's something that maybe, Michael had talked to Mike T about, and Mike T and Eric talked about it, or however that conversation went, or is that something that is been used in other places that you've been in your time in the league?
I mean, I think it's just like a standard, like a collective standard that any team that, is hunting wins and wants to win and breed a winning culture, you want to have a level of consistency because that becomes your identity. You can name other teams, in this league, and you know exactly what their identity is because they've consistently done it at a high level. So, we're on the hunt for that. We're trying to create a level of consistency where every night we know when we come in, this is what we do, no matter what the score is.
I love that framing, though, going from like minutes to quarters to halves. And obviously y'all have been able to put some games together here. Brittney Sykes, guard for the Mystics, with us here on the Hoffman Show. The other thing that I've really enjoyed since the Olympic break, watching you obviously, one, be out there consistently. What you've had to battle through this year is insane. But you're at a point now in your career and on this team where you are a leader. And there have been a couple of nights, thankfully not too many, where you can't buy a bucket. But you are still fighting your face off on the defensive end. Your energy doesn't change. Is that something that is like that always been who you've been as a player? Is that something as you've gotten older and matured in this league that you've been able to figure out ways to contribute and make sure that your energy and your leadership doesn't fall off, even if you're having a night where you're not able to hit from the field?
Yeah, no, for sure. That was something that I had to figure out just throughout my entire career. I think once I got to the league and once I got to the pros, I had to figure out very quick, like, even if I'm not scoring, I have to have some effect on the game, whether it's on the defensive end, whether, even on the offensive end, going to the basket, but creating shots for others. So for me, it's just really the mentality of like, okay, how can I stay on the floor? If we're being completely honest, like, how can I stay on the floor? But not only how can I stay on the floor, but how can I stay on the floor and be the most effective player for my team?
No doubt. And last night, thankfully, not one of those nights. Nice 14 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists in the win over the Sky. As the season went on, and obviously you were unfortunately watching so much of that early part from the sidelines, you and Shakira over there, and then Carly's been in and out of the lineup, but you're just floating around. Is there any talk like, hey, if we can get back on the floor and we can put it together, playoffs are still in reach, or was it just like, I want to get back on the floor and let's see what happens? Because here you are suddenly with 4 games left to go in the season, and with last night's result, y'all are 1 game out of the final playoff spot.
I mean, I think it just, at this point, it just comes down to everybody being healthy, and we see that we have an opportunity. So we're playing 1 game at a time. Like, we're keeping everything like right in front of us, not far ahead, not thinking about what happened in the past, in the beginning of the season. Like, literally, it's like, all right, we played Chicago, we got the game, boom, we got Atlanta tomorrow. Like, what is it that we have to do to win the game tomorrow with Atlanta? Because we will play them at home that next game. That's going to be a totally different game. We got to prepare for a whole nother different game. So it's just really just staying right in front of us, and just obviously, like, the main thing is just everybody remaining healthy.
A couple of your teammates I want to ask you about real quick, but then I do want to ask you about what you expect from Atlanta and these 2 huge games that you have against them over the next couple of days. Obviously, Aaliyah had one of her better games of the season last night. Got the hard hat after, 15 points, 10 boards. What have you seen from her, and how has she been able to find a little bit more consistency here post-Olympic break and really become the player that she is, where she's now back in the starting lineup and contributing the way she is down the stretch?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is, like, her willingness to just absorb and want to learn. Like, you give her an assignment or anything, and she got it. She's locking it down. If she doesn't have it, she makes sure she works on it. Every time there's an optional shoot, every time we get enough shots after practice, you always see Aaliyah working out. She's probably, like, the last person, or second to last, I don't know, person leaving the gym. So for her to do that as a rookie is amazing, but it's just like her willingness to just want to play hard, go get the rebounds, and just want to absorb knowledge.
And then the other player I want to ask you about, I promise it's not just because she spent a little bit of time at Cuse as well, even though clearly the bias on this show is, it shades a little bit orange. But Emily Engstler's really come on in the second half of this season as well. What have you seen from her, and what has she meant to this team?
Man, she has finally found that pocket, and she has taken off. I'm so happy for her. It's just really dope to see her figure it out and really have that confidence and that swagger that she always has whenever she plays. And it's been tremendous for us, especially, with Kira going down. Emily really stepped up and has helped us in a lot of key wins when we really, really needed a bucket. It was him pretty much doing it.
And then, you just mentioned you have these 2 games against Atlanta. Atlanta, and Chicago are fighting for that final playoff spot. When you scout Atlanta, they've been such, in many ways like your team, been battling injuries all year long, players in and out.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see from the current version of the Dream that's really been playing well as of late as well, especially when they've been able to get all their players on the floor?
Yeah, I mean, they are a really good team. And like you said, with the injuries, people being in and out, the lineups look different. Like, we're playing a whole totally different Atlanta team than we played back in June. So, them having JC on the floor, Ryan's doing really good, Alicia Gray's playing really well, and then Tina's in the middle. So, I mean, what we expect for them to obviously get the ball and just really, really pack the paint on defense. They're a really good defensive team, and they really have active hands. They pressure 94 feet, my gosh. So we're really going to have to prepare and just be ready for a battle. And they're home, and that home crowd is really, really good.
Yeah. What about Ryan makes her so special?
I mean, she's 6'2". She's freaking 6'2", and she really has a way of getting to her spots. She uses her body well, especially against smaller guards. And, I mean, without going to say her jump shot, her three-pointer is a really good shot. So she's a dynamic guard. She can get to the basket. She can post up, mid-post, and she can shoot the three. So, and she's a high-usage player on their team. So we're really going to have to make sure we find her in transition.
Yeah, so outside of she's got size and uses it well. She's a great shooter. She's very skilled, and you have to pay attention at all times. Other than that, it's a really easy day at the office. For you, like, would you say she's one of the toughest guards in the league? Like, obviously you're known for your defensive prowess for good reason. But like, if you're thinking about these are my hardest days at work of the season, like, does she crack that list for you immediately, come top of mind?
I would say I put every guard, like any guard I have to guard, in the category of like I just look at my opponent and I just respect them, because every guard on this team is a pro, and every guard that I guard, like we all had to go through the same camp and everything, to get to this position. So there are guards that I'm like, all right, I really have to like make sure that I'm on my P's and Q's, but I put that on everybody. But Ryan, with her having her size at 6'2" and me being at 5'9", that could be seen as a disadvantage. But her length does cause a problem for me, because I would have to probably sit up a little bit higher than what I want to on a defensive stance. So she does have to make me actually like change my stance a little bit. But again, like all the guards that I guard, I respect everybody across the board, and I come to work every day to compete.
And then sometimes you get to go home with a hard hat, and that's cool.
Yeah, until your teammates smack you with it.
Yeah, does that hurt, by the way? Because that is the bit, is right? They put the helmet on so they can smack you upside the head. And I'm just like, hey, can we just do like a nice, friendlier tap? Like, how much does that hurt?
No, that's all love taps. It doesn't hurt.
Okay, all right. Well, you insinuated
it.
It hurt.
Underneath.
All right, fair enough. All right, Slim, best of luck this weekend. We'll be seeing you, obviously, in these final home games, and get to close it out at Cap One, which will be a blast. I will send my best, or your best, back to AC when I see her on the tail end of this trip. And thanks for joining us here on the radio.
All right, man, no problem. Thank you again.
You got it. That is Britney Sykes with us, everybody, here on the Hoffman Show. Mystics tomorrow night against the Atlanta Dream. That's an Ion game, so the radio broadcast will not be here on the Team 980, because we have just the games that are on Monumental. But I do believe Sunday's game is here on the station, is that one against Atlanta is a Monumental Sports broadcast. And then, of course, you got the Liberty, and then you have the Fever at Capital One Arena to close things out. So super-duper tough close to the schedule. But these next two games against Atlanta could determine whether or not the Mystics are in the playoffs. And, by the way, it could seal knocking Atlanta out of the playoffs. Either way, one of those two will be a lottery pick. Of course, Chicago is going to have something to say about that as well. But that's kind of the weird underbelly of this final thing here, is this final stretch run, is the Mystics have the Dream's pick. So they're either going to have two lottery picks if Chicago can hold on, or whichever of the Mystics in Atlanta doesn't make the playoffs, the Mystics will get that lottery pick, and then the final non-lottery pick, or the highest non-lottery pick, as the 8th seed in the WNBA playoffs. When we get back, we will wrap up the show with our favorite things from the show today, and we have some real things that we've been saving up all week, so we gotta get to them next on the Team 980. Hoffman Show. Wrapping up here on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. I'm in Indianapolis because we're here to visit my good friend Alicia Clark as the Las Vegas Aces take on the Indiana Fever twice in 3 days, and so we're at the game. And Anthony, I have a generic sporting experience question for you real quick before we get to real things and our favorite things on the show today. But I mentioned, not just to tell the YouTube folks, like, hey, why are you in a hotel room? Or if anybody can notice a slight difference in the sound of my microphone as I'm wearing a headset as opposed to a lovely, beautiful processed radio microphone. But being a fan of an away team in an opposing arena, you have plenty of experience with this. Because you've gone to see, like, the Colts on the road when you're going to root on, especially, like, when it's your friend, right? That's an even more unique experience than just, like, hey, I'm an away fan going because I like the team. It's one thing, like, when you go as a Commanders fan and you're going on the road and you might act a certain way. But, like, when you're like, oh, no, I'm here to see my friend play in the opposing stadium.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that?
With poise. I try to stay under the radar. Did you guys have on a jersey?
We did. I'm trying to think. I just wore like my Everyone Watches Women's Sports shirt.
Okay.
And I don't think Rachel also did not have any Aces / Alicia gear on. Tomorrow's a different story because we got.
I was about to say it.
Tomorrow I'm wearing my Aces jersey and Rachel is wearing her Asia Wilson Team USA jersey.
And you're in Indy. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say Indy fans are like Philly fans, but they can get a little rowdy.
They can.
They can get a little rowdy. How do you necessarily go about handling that?
I don't think anyone's going to say anything to me. And also, like, tomorrow I'm going to have my niece with me.
Cool.
I'm going to have a 3-year-old with me. Like, no one's going to say anything to someone with a 3-year-old.
Yeah. Then you'll be
all right. If they do, she's going to beat them up. That's how that's going to go.
Yeah, I think everything will be sure. I've never really had a bad experience on the road. I've never had a bad experience on the road.
In part, I haven't either because I can keep my mouth shut. But there was a lady last night behind us who just, the simplest way to explain it is she doesn't know what a foul is. Is one of those where it's just like, how is that a foul? Which hilariously, there was one play last night that Christy Sides challenged that was so clearly a foul. And it was actually a play that, this was a wacky bit, not to get too sidetracked, but like the referees called the foul correctly. Indiana was like looking back at their bench like, do we challenge this? The referees like slow played the free throw to kind of give Indiana time to check it. Becky Hammond lost her mind, got teed up for like losing her mind for allowing Indiana to challenge the call because it took so long because it was an and one to let the free throw go and then review it. And it's clearly a foul because it was a foul. And it was like, no one except for this lady behind me thought that it wasn't a foul. But, I will say that. I will give Indiana fans credit. It was a very homer crowd. An entire group of people who did not think a single foul was committed by their team, and every potential sniff of contact was a foul on their team. Yeah. And that's just sometimes how home crowds should be. Irrational people who don't actually know what they're looking at.
And I stand by every last one of those people in there.
What was your favorite thing on the show today?
I'm not gonna lie. I think B Sykes joining the show got me excited because again, when you guys were talking about the intensity that she plays with, she played like that when I was at Syracuse.
Yeah,
she's part of the reason we end up losing to UConn in the national championship. Whatever, I think that was 2016. But because of her, we were able to even make that run. Her, Alexis Peterson, the Day Twins. Yeah. But yeah, I just love the drive and energy that she plays with because I'm cut from the same cloth as her.
Oh, okay. Would she say that?
Yeah.
It's you might be.
She
cut
hasn't
from,
seen me play.
Say you might be cut from the same cloth, but the fabric quality is a little bit different. With all due respect,
A lot different. A lot different.
she's in the league, bro. But no, I really enjoyed that chat. I always love talking to Slim. She's great. I think outside of that, my favorite part of the show today was hour one. The calls were great. Mark and Largo was an adventure, but a fun one. But like actually brought up some like really good talking points. And you know, Anthony, it's a great day on the show when Gary and Art Bumper Marlboro is a great call.
Yep.
So
Good call.
Gary was great.
Yep.
The first call we had, I can't remember who it was because he wasn't a frequent caller, but a really good call.
I think it was Kenny.
Yeah, I think it was Kenny. I think you're right. Kenny,
Yep, Kenny
all
and
the
Largo.
Emmanuel Forbes stuff. Like, we opened the show at 4 o'clock. I talked about Forbes. If you want to go back and rewind, you certainly can. And then we took a couple of those calls, and I said to Anthony in a break, I was like, that was better than my open. So go listen to the calls in the first hour on the Hoffman Show podcast. Right now, listen to real things real people said in real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, Anthony, you've been stacking up stuff back in the lab while I'm out here in Indy. What do you got?
So all right, we're gonna get to Kevin Durant, the story behind him being pictured
the
holding
photo
his hands
of
up.
him. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, coming down the slide. Here he goes.
We didn't ask about the slide.
The slide pick? Oh,
What?
they caught me at the wrong time. So on this slide, like when you got on the slide, it was like 2 handles when you walk up because it was like a big step.
Well,
So
are
I'm
you
grabbing
sure?
up on the handles and I jump off and I let it go. And as I'm putting my hands down, that's when they caught me. And I was just about to go like this to slide off.
I mean, it must have taken you 1 second to get out. You're
No, it was a nice size slide, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't, it was, you know, the picture didn't do its justice.
when you
know?
saw it go viral, were you just like, just another thing for KD?
First, I thought, who has this long ass lens to catch us in the middle of the ocean like this? But I respect it.
That's a good question. Who has
That
the
is a
long
funny
lens
picture.
in the middle of the ocean? Why can't Kevin Durant go on a slide for fun on his own? Why they have to catch him at the when you take the picture on a ride's important. I remember in Disney at I think it's at their MGM studio. They have the rock and roller. No, is it the rock and roller coaster? Whichever one that goes like 0 to 60 in 2 point whatever seconds. And I remember going on it with my buddy and the like putting the seatbelt thingy on and realizing there was like a little bit of room between me and the seatbelt. And I was like, I'm not gonna fly out of this thing, but like it's not snug. I'm like, is this okay? He's like, yeah, it's fine. So then it accelerates, boom, 0 to 60, and I go, huh, because I get hurled, I get bent over the seatbelt. And Anthony, guess when they take the picture on the ride that goes 0 to 60 in 2.8
Right
seconds?
at that point, right?
Yeah. So in the picture, I'm like, whoops.
I know all about it.
Not.
All right, we got one more.
All right, you got to be quick.
Kobe Turner, defensive tackle for the Rams. He advocates sitting like an old man.
Are you sitting with your feet crossed? Who granddaddy you is? Look at this. Then he got his hands the same. It ain't comfortable. It is comfortable. I ain't gonna lie. Ain't gonna lie. Ain't no way that comfortable. No, try it. Try it.
I can confirm, Anthony. I'm sitting like it right now.
Yeah.
It is comfortable. Terps Talk with the Locks next.